Hello, welcome to the McDonald Show, the cybersecurity show. Let's talk about what may be the worst API security ever seen, courtesy of McDonald's. In this video, I'm going to give you a brief overview of that and code snippets that probably was used to exploit McDonald's. So without further ado, let's go into it. We're going dark. Security flaws in McDonald's India's Mac delivery system expose significant vulnerabilities in their APIs, potentially compromising customer and delivery personnel data. The issues discovered by security researcher Eaton Severe from Traceable AI affected McDonald's India West and South operations. The API vulnerabilities allowed unauthorized users to access, hijack, redirect, or track orders in real time, place legitimate orders for as little as 1 cent, view customer information including full names, email addresses, and phone numbers, access driver details including vehicle numbers, profile pictures, and real-time locations, retrieve order invoices, and submit feedback for any order. So these flaws stemmed from inadequate API authorization checks, specifically broken object level authorization, also known as BOLA, and broken object property level authorization, BOPA. So the vulnerabilities exposed hundreds of millions of orders to potential exploitation. So the timeline and resolution was, July 2024. Severe reported the vulnerabilities to McDonald's. In September 2024, McDonald's fixed the issues. In December 2024, the vulnerabilities were publicly, disclosed. So now let's get into exploiting BOLA, right? Step 1 in exploiting BOLA, you're going to want to identify the vulnerable endpoints. Now, here's a description of the process BOLA Buster uses to identify vulnerable endpoints, and BOLA Buster is a tool. So you have BOLA Buster focuses on authenticating endpoints with input parameters that uniquely identify data objects such as username, email, team, LD, invoice LD, and visit LD. Please take a moment right now to hit that subscribe button and the like button. Once again, please take a moment right now to hit that subscribe button and the like button. Thank you. So the system uses AI to analyze each endpoint's functionalities and parameters to determine those that reference or return sensitive data. The identification process involves the following steps. Peter, please put the code on the screen. Once PVEs are identified, BOLA Buster creates test plans and generates test cases to verify the vulnerability. The system then executes the test plans against the target API server and analyzes the responses to determine if the PVEs are actually vulnerable to BOLA. Step 2, exploiting BOLA, right? Here's a code snippet demonstrating the manipulation of object identifiers to exploit a broken object level authorization vulnerability. So Peter, please put that code on the screen. Now, Step 3 in exploiting BOLA, here is a code snippet demonstrating an unauthorized access attempt exploiting a broken object level authorization vulnerability. Peter, please put that code on the screen. So this code snippet illustrates a simple express.js API endpoint vulnerable to BOLA attacks. The /user/ the :ID route retrieves user data based on the provided ID without performing any authorization checks. An attacker could easily manipulate the ID parameter to access data of any user regardless of their permissions. To exploit this vulnerability, an attacker could simply change the ID in the URL. Peter, please put that code on the screen. Now, step 4 in exploiting BOLA, here's a code snippet demonstrating a broken object level authorization vulnerability in a Flask application for data retrieval. Peter, please put that code on the screen. So this code snippet demonstrates a BOLA vulnerability because it allows any user to access any profile by simply changing the ID parameter in the URL. The get_profile function retrieves user data without verifying if the requester has the necessary permissions to access that specific user's information. To exploit this vulnerability, an attacker could simply change the ID in the URL to access other users' profiles. And Peter, please put that code on the screen. Each of these requests would return the corresponding user's data without any authorization checks. To fix this vulnerability, implement proper authorization checks before returning the user data. Now, for example, Peter, please put that code on the screen. Now, let's get into BOPA. Let's talk about the exploits for that. So the step one, the broken object property level authorization, BOPA, occurs when an API fails to properly enforce authorization checks on individual properties within data objects. Now, here are two vulnerable code snippets that demonstrate BOPA. Number one, you have identify vulnerable properties, right? User reporting API, and Peter, please put that code on the screen. This API endpoint is vulnerable because it allows unauthenticated users to access sensitive properties of the reported user, such as the full name and recent location. Now, social media video sharing API, Peter, please put that code on the screen. This endpoint is vulnerable because it blindly accepts and processes all properties in the request payload without checking if the user has permission to modify them. A regular user could potentially manipulate privileged properties like block status by simply adding them to the JSON request. Now, step two in exploiting BOPA, craft malicious requests. Now, here's a code snippet demonstrating a potential BOPA broken object property level vulnerability. Peter, please put that code on the screen. This code is vulnerable to BOPA because it allows updating any property of the user object without proper authorization checks. A malicious request exploiting this vulnerability could look like, and Peter, please put that code on the screen. So this particular malicious request attempts to elevate the user's privileges by setting is_admin to true and modifying the account balance. To mitigate this vulnerability, implement property level authorization checks and validate user permissions before allowing updates to sensitive fields. Step three in exploiting BOPA, send manipulated requests. So to send manipulated requests for testing broken object property level BOPA, you can use Python with the request library, right? And here's a code snippet to demonstrate. Peter, please put that code on the screen. So this code snippet demonstrates how to test for BOPA vulnerabilities by sending both original and manipulated requests to an API endpoint. The manipulated payload attempts to change the is_admin property, which should not be possible for a regular user to modify. Now, to use this code, replace the URL with the actual API endpoint you're testing, update the headers with the appropriate authorization token, modify the payloads as needed to match API's expected format. Now, step four in exploiting BOPA. Here's an example of how excessive data exposure, a component of BOPA, can be exploited. Peter, please put that code on the screen. In this GraphQL mutation, an attacker could exploit a BOPA vulnerability to access sensitive properties of the reported user, such as recent location, which should not be accessible to other users. The API is returning more data than necessary, exposing potential sensitive information. Step five, exploiting BOPA occurs when an API fails to properly enforce authorization checks on object properties, allowing attackers to manipulate these properties and potentially escalate privileges or alter sensitive information. Now, here's a simplified example of how BOPA might manifest its code. Peter, please put that code on the screen. Now, in this example, the update_user function allows updating any property of a user object without proper authorization checks. An attacker could exploit this by sending a request to update their own user object and by including the is_admin property. Peter, please put that code on the screen. This could potentially escalate the user's privileges to admin level, demonstrating a BOPA vulnerability. So that is what I have for you today. If you like this video, if you were entertained, and if you were educated, please take a moment right now to hit that subscribe button and the like button. Once again, if you were educated, entertained, and you learned something new, please hit that subscribe button and the like button. Also, let me know your opinion in the comment section below. See you in the next video.